I'll meet in the gym, and then if we find a better room, I'll let you know. But just plan on meeting in the back of the gym. We can hold hands, be Pentecostal, and pray together. So that's what Pentecostals do. Could you close that door, Isaac? Thanks, brother. So let's do that. Does that work for everybody? Because I know at 8:30 the greeters go out, and a lot starts to happen, you know. But is that pretty accurate? Like there's a little bit of time where things slow down a little bit once everything's set up. Slows down a little bit. We could gather together and pray. We want to be prayed up, but pray together, I think, helps us get unified and be on the same team. And prayer really works, and it helps with your relationships. When you don't pray together, you get snappy with each other, and you know you have a short fuse, and you know you get cranky. And so I know in my life, if Mercy and I don't pray, we get cranky with each other, snappy, and say, "Oh, we didn't pray together today." You know, so I think it's important that we're not even praying together, you know, on ourselves, by ourselves every day, but that we're praying together as a team. So, does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Does anybody see a conflict with that?
Yeah.
All right. And
All in favor say
all in favor say
aye.
Say what?
What?
All right. Next week, no class. Next week is no class. I know. I think a few people are going to Vegas, and for Pastor Benny's conference. Jealous, yeah. Me too. I'm jealous too. I'm not gonna be able to go. But no class next week. Fall break. And then, how are you doing on your homework? On your vision statement, your project description, your strategic plan. Has everybody sent me a draft?
I think so.
If you haven't, send me something by tomorrow night. I don't even care if it just says, "Hey, here's what I want to do. I need to know your vision, your project. Send me what you're thinking." Okay? I need it from everybody by tomorrow night. I'll give you till tomorrow night. Give me your journals by tomorrow night. All right, by tomorrow night, give me your journals. Not tonight. Some of you already sent them in, but tomorrow night. No class next week. No journal next week. I'd encourage you to journal for yourselves, but you don't have to submit it next week. It's a fall break, so yeah. So let's get moving on that strategic plan, on your project. It has to be pulled off by the middle of December, and so let's get working on that. Spend some time next week, work on that if you're behind. And so Pastor Chris is going to teach us tonight in the time we have remaining. You guys are just prayer junkies and worship junkies. You guys spend an hour and a half in prayer, but time flies when you're having fun.
Come on.
And so thank you guys for praying over me. I really appreciated that. And pray for Mercy. She has bronchitis for the second time. The doctors didn't want to give her antibiotics again, because she just had it 2 weeks ago, so she just got off antibiotics. So they didn't want to give her antibiotics again. They prescribed it, but they said only take it if you absolutely have to. She's been fatigued all week. Starting today, she felt a little bit better. She does that persistent cough from her chest, and so you know, if she's not better by tomorrow, I'm going to tell her you got to take those antibiotics.
No.
And so maybe. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. We got one service on Sunday, set up at 8, service at 11. I'm going to be bilingual. See how it works. Bilingual worship. I'm going to preach. Mercy will translate, so everything's going to be translated. So see how that all plays out, works out. So trusting it'll go well. But the Bible says in Ephesians 6:13, having done all, stand. So the pictures of a Roman soldier who's been in battle. And, you know, did you guys ever get that lesson when you were in kids' church as a kid or Sunday school? And they did with the felt, any Assembly God kids?
Felt boards,
Felt boards, and then you know, you have the shiny soldier, or you did the pictures, and he's got like this shiny armor and like a superhero. No Roman soldier looked that good. You're in a battle, you're muddy, you're dirty, your helmet's dented, your shield is bent and dented, your sword is whacked and got pieces missing, and your leather skirt that they wore is all beat up, and your breastplate is dented from being hit with swords and being attacked. And that's what a real soldier looks like. We picture this beautiful shiny soldier in this beautiful armor of God, but really it means you're under attack, you're being hit, you're being whooped. And it says, having done all, once you've handled the onslaught of the enemy, stand. Having done all, stand. And most people don't stand. When the pressure really gets thick, people get out of the kitchen. So what God asks is that having done all, is that we stand. And Passion Church's been through a lot, but you know, we're still standing.
Amen.
We're still here.
That's right.
And we're not going anywhere, except up. And so if if we gotta strip it down to 20 people again and rebuild, we'll do that.
We'll do that.
If that's what we gotta do,
Right.
I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to rebuild with our leadership team and our leadership college and say, let's plant a new church. If we gotta do that, we'll do that. All right? So I've already turned down every good offer I've had. Haven't had any new good offers. And I threw away my parachute.
Amen.
I'm in a plane, and either we survive or I go down with it. So I'm not bailing. I'm not going anywhere. No parachute. There's no plan B for me. Now I got to make a living. I got to figure out a way how to make a living. We're not making a living, and so we got to figure out a way to do that. So I'm going to do some business on the side, do what I can do. But my heart's in passion, and as long as it takes, olive trees take 20, 25, 30, 35 years before they bear their first olive. And so we can't compare ourselves to another tree. We can't look at another tree or another church and go, how come we're not producing fruit as fast as them? Why don't we have our own building? Why don't we have that? We're not them. They're in a different season. They're a different type of tree. I know what kind of tree we are, and it's going to take some time. But it will work. It'll work big. It'll be great. And so we're going to be fruitful. But God a lot of times prunes us down before we bear fruit. And God took Gideon's 32,000 army and he trimmed them down to 300. And so they were left with 10% of what they started with. And Gideon wasn't very happy about that. So I don't know any leader that is. I'm not happy about it. But, it is what it is. And the Bible says that it's the Lord's doing. It's marvelous in our eyes. So, God has pruned us down again. I thought we'd been pruned and didn't think we were going to get pruned again. But then God prunes us again. So it's like, okay, all right. This is who I have to go to battle. Let's go to battle. Let's go to war. Let's do this thing. And let's bring revival. God brought revival to the nation of Wales. 100,000 people saved in 6 months through 2 guys, 25-year-old guys, coal miners, no Bible degrees, and 3 teenage singers. God used that little misfit band of 5 people to bring revival to a whole nation. 100,000 people saved. They didn't have a big team, so who became their team? The police officers. There was no crimes, so the police officers were their security team, and they formed a quartet, started singing in their band. They didn't have no instruments, all a cappella, and started singing for them. The judges were given white gloves because there were no cases to try. Absolute society transformation. So church growth fills empty chairs, but revival fills empty hearts.
Hello.
And America is all into church growth. Well, I'm into revival. And I want to see lives changed and society changed through revival. And so we're running our race. We're not going to compare ourselves to Copper Point. I'm so happy for them. Pastor Galen has paid a tremendous price to get where he's at. And he's been here a long time in the city. And I rejoice for him, and I'm happy for him. And I celebrate them. I celebrate Pastor Skip. And I know him personally. And at one point he asked me to join the Calvary team. Said he would sponsor me to plant a church. And I turned down that offer too. Maybe that was dumb. But probably would have started with a couple hundred people and probably $100,000 instead of no grand and 8 people. But there wasn't God's, I don't think that was God's plan. But I celebrate Calvary, and I'm happy Skip's back in town. And I missed him while he was gone. He's a gift to our city. And people come from Calvary and they come to Passion. They don't last long because they come and they got a chip on their shoulder and they badmouth Skip. And I say, don't ever talk bad about Pastor Skip in front of me again. Don't do that, because if you'll talk bad about Skip, you'll talk bad about me when you leave my church. So let's just end this now. Go ahead and leave my church and talk bad about me. All right? So, because I have a lot of respect for Pastor Skip and for Legacy. And I wish them all the best. They got their race to run. We got our race to run. I know what we got to do. Let's do it. All right? Let's do it. You guys in?
Amen.
You guys in?
Yes.
This is an uphill battle. This is not easy street. Nothing at Passion is easy. You guys have already figured that out. And but let's do it. Let's do it right. Let's do it with honor and integrity, and make Jesus proud of us as we're doing it. All right, guys? Give it up for Pastor Chris tonight. Come on, man, Candy. Well.
Do that again. Well. All right. Hey, it's good to be back. I'm not going to take too long tonight, but I want to talk to you guys about how leaders lead change and they execute change. First thing we'll talk about is leaders lead change. Can someone tell me why it is imperative that leaders lead change? Can someone tell me why is it imperative that leaders lead change?
I think division or whatever the group is doing would die. I mean, because sometimes you need to change, and if you don't change, whatever's happening could go south and versus up.
Okay.
So sometimes you need change.
Okay. What else?
Come on, Eric.
No one else will do it.
Stop looking at
No one else will do
Right.
it?
Yeah.
See you right there.
I think one of the reasons that is extremely important that leaders lead change is because they're the only ones that know where they're going. Leaders are the only ones that know where they're going.
Yeah.
We've learned already that people can be primary leaders and people can be secondary leaders, but not everybody can be a primary leader.
Yeah.
And so, if a leader is going to lead, they have to know where they're going. If they don't know where they're going, they're a follower.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Right.
And I think so many times we've got people that want to be followers, that want to be leaders, but have the strength of a follower.
Mm.
And so it is important that leaders lead change because they're the only ones that know where they're going.
Yeah.
I think I've got 5 reasons on why it's difficult for us as leaders to lead change. 5 reasons on why it's difficult for us as leaders to lead change. Number 1, it causes you to think differently than everyone around you. It causes you to think differently than everyone around you. Number 2, you have to learn how to manage both the present and the future without letting either one of those get out of balance.
Mm.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah. Say those 2 again, Chris.
Number 1, it causes you to think differently than everyone around you. As a leader, you're going to think on a different plane than a follower. You're going to have foresight. You're going to have knowledge of what it takes to get to your preferred future. It's going to cause you to think differently. Number 2, you have to learn how to manage both the present and the future without letting either one getting out of balance. You have to manage both the present and the future without letting either one of those get out of balance.
Okay, pause.
Number 3, I think it's difficult to lead change because it causes you to take large risks. It causes you to take large risks. With those large risks, number 4, can potentially cause very large mistakes.
Excuse me, can you repeat number 3 one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. Number 3, it causes you to take large risks. It causes you to take large risks. Number 4, with those risks can lead to very large mistakes. And I think the fear of failure is one of the greatest things that a leader that wants to bring change has to deal with. Because you're not only leading yourself, but you're leading a group of people. And if you fail, most people are going to say that you failed backward. But I love what John Maxwell says. You've got to fail forward.
Yes.
Come on.
You have to fail forward. All failure is not final unless you learn from it. And number 5, it often causes people to think that you're crazy. It often causes people to think that you're crazy. So again, I'll recap those just for you guys one more time. Five reasons why it's difficult to lead change as a leader. Number 1, it causes you to think differently than everyone around you. Number 2, you have to learn how to manage both the present and the future without letting either one of those get out of balance. Number 3, it causes you to take a large risk. Number 4, large risk can lead to large mistakes. And number 5, people often think that you're crazy. A leader that is intimidated by change is a leader that will never change.
Mm. Yeah.
That hit me about 2 weeks ago as I was preparing for this. A leader that is intimidated by change is a leader that will never change. Because they're never going to pull the trigger to make a change. They're intimidated by whether it be man's opinion, whether it's money in the bank. They're intimidated by so many other things that they will not pull the trigger to lead change. I'm going to hop on that pony and ride that just a little bit later. But a leader that is intimidated by change is a leader that will never change. Change in any organization or ministry brings about evaluation in every department. And I think one of the things in churches today, we don't sit and evaluate ministries. We sit and coddle ministries because they've been in place for 50 years. When it comes to ministry, leaders need to ask tough questions when they want to lead change. And there's 4 questions I have been asking since day one of ministry. Whether I was interning, whether I was on staff at a church, these are 4 questions I asked myself when it came to leading change in ministry. Number 1, what is this ministry doing effectively? What is this ministry doing effectively? What are the benchmarks that we can write down in a staff meeting that we can look and say, okay, we are being effective? The second question I ask is, where is this ministry lacking? What are we doing effectively? What are we lacking? What are the good and what are the bad? Number 3, and again, slow me down if I'm going too fast. If the ministry is not currently being effective in accomplishing the mission, vision, and purpose of the church, what do we need to do to revamp the ministry and bring new life to it? If the ministry is not currently being effective in accomplishing the mission, vision, and purpose of the church, what do we need to do to revamp the ministry and breathe new life into it?
Can you repeat that last one?
Yeah, of course. If the ministry is not currently being effective, if you've asked question 1, what are we doing effectively, and you've come up with 2 reasons, and you've answered question number 2, what is this ministry lacking, and you've answered like 30 questions. Number 3, if the ministry is not being effective currently, if it's not accomplishing the mission, the vision, and purpose of the church, what do you need to do to revamp the ministry to breathe new life into it? And number 4, and this is the toughest one to do for a lot of pastors today and a lot of leaders, whether it's in ministry, whether it's in any organization, this is probably one of the hardest things to do. After evaluation, and it's shown that that program or ministry is no longer effective, if you've tried to revamp it, 2 words, kill it. If after evaluation and after it has been shown that it cannot be revamped, kill it. Kill it. So number 1, what is this ministry doing effectively? Number 2, what is this ministry lacking? Where is this ministry lacking? How can we revamp the ministry to effectively accomplish the mission, vision, and purpose of the church or organization? And if we've sat down, evaluated it, and have seen that it cannot be revamped anymore, then it's time to kill it and put it to death. Some things have got to die in order for them to live again.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham had to kill Isaac symbolically for him to live. When I think of change, and change specifically within the church world, I think of a barf bag. I'll explain why. Because when a leader gets up and says, hey, we're going to change stuff, well, let me back up. I fly quite often. On one of my last flights to Atlanta, turbulence was super bad. I normally don't get really sick on the airplane, but this time I grabbed the bag and just had it ready, just in case. I had a lot of Dr. Pepper and Starbucks, and that was all in my stomach, and that was nothing. That was just it. So I had a feeling something was going to come up. Luckily, it didn't. But I noticed that anytime we hit turbulence, I had the barf bag closer to my face because I didn't know what was going to happen. because it was a sudden movement, it was a sudden jolt, it was a sudden shake in what was comfortable to me. And the reason I think of change a lot of times like a barf bag is because anytime a leader decides to bring change into the church, he wants to shake things up and he wants to ruffle some feathers. People in the church begin to complain. They begin to throw up with their excuses and complaints that it's always been done this way. And they freak out. All because a leader is wanting to bring change to a church. Motion sickness is running rampant in our churches today because people are afraid of change. Motion sickness is running rampant in churches today because people are afraid of change. And it's not that most people aren't afraid of change. They often like the idea of change. They're like, okay, it's 1970 suits were cool in 1970. If you're one of them crazy indie people that likes to rock the 1970 suits now in 2012, you can do that because there's some people that can pull it off. But majority of people today cannot pull that off. So they had to change their mindset. You don't wear suits anymore on a Sunday morning. You wear jeans, a nice shirt, a skinny tie if you want to rock the skinny tie like Eric does all the time. But the things have changed. And it's, again, and it's not that most people don't like change. They don't resist the idea of change. They resist the idea of doing things differently. They like the idea of change. Okay, yes, we need to paint the walls. Okay, from white to what color? Well, I don't know, let's go tan. Okay, great. That needs to happen. But that means you've actually got to take out tools, buy the paint, and actually get to work. It's not the idea of change that people resist. It's the resistance of doing things differently that they don't like.
Say that again.
I don't remember what that was. It's the resistance. It's not the resistance of.
It's not the idea.
It's not the idea of change that people don't like. It's the idea of doing things differently. Because they've got set in their ways. They've got comfortable. They've sat. Their butt is imprinted in that one chair. It's got the nice butt cheeks there, and that's my seat. And you ask me to change. It's not that I don't want to do, it's not that I'm opposed to change, it's that I don't like to have to give up my seat because my butt cheeks fit perfectly in that seat.
What's the second part again? I forgot the first part.
It's not the idea of change that people resist. It's the idea of doing things differently. It's the idea of doing things differently. As leaders, especially as Christian leaders, we must value change. We must value change. We must constantly present the never-changing gospel in ever-changing methods. Everything has an expiration date. Everything has an expiration date. I was listening to, when Hillsong was having their conference a couple months ago, I downloaded the app on my iPad and I was live streaming the Hillsong conference. And one night Christine Kane was speaking. And if you know anything about her, she leads the A21 campaign, phenomenal ministry. And she was talking about change and how a lot of time, 25 years ago when she approached Pastor Brian about creating a ministry, it was unheard of for a woman to lead any ministry in a church, yet especially 25 years ago. And she goes, the change that has happened with not only with women in ministry, but with music in ministry has been life-changing for her because she's worked with Darlene Chet. I mean, obviously, I don't know if you know this, Darlene is no longer at Hillsong. She left 2-3 years ago. Her and her husband moved to the other side of Australia or over to New Zealand and they're pastoring a church. They still work in conjunction with Hillsong, but she is no longer on staff there. And so she was talking about change and she said there's one song that will never be sung again in Hillsong. Can anybody guess that song? Shout to the Lord is correct. They will never sing the song Shout to the Lord at a Hillsong church again. Why? Because everything has an expiration date. Pastor Brian has understood there's some things that are good for a season, but there's some things that are just need to be thrown out. And if you look at the history of Hillsong music, they started off with a really rough piano and some vocals, and that's it. If you go back to a 1996 Shout to the Lord CD that Darlene put out with Hillsong and play what they're playing today, it's night and day.
Yeah.
Night and day. Because they understood things have an expiration date. Thinking about this idea of expiration date, I was going through my pantry the other day just to see what was in there. I found a bottle of ranch dressing from 2005.
Ew.
Oh.
Was it still sealed?
Oh, it was sealed and everything.
Nice. Should have opened it.
No, I'm not going to open that.
Oh, that's good.
But here's the thing. Why is it so often in churches, and even in our own homes, if you're unlike me, you actually do this. You actually clean out your pantry because things get old. Things get old. Yet why is it in churches when things have an expiration date and ministries have an expiration date, we tend to keep it? We tend to hold on to that thing like a sacred cow because Sister So-and-so set this up 42 years ago. Bless her heart. Kill it. If it's not being effective, kill it. And that's one of the things church leaders don't know how to do is kill things anymore because they don't want to ruffle feathers. They don't want to ruffle feathers. We like to throw away things in pantries in our house. But when it comes to ministries in the church, leaders are too scared to pull the trigger to change stuff. And as a leader, we cannot afford to sit and let expiration mentalities and methods sit in churches any longer. We can't. A leader who does not change is no longer leading. A leader who does not lead change is no longer leading. So really quickly tonight, I believe there are 3 ways, and there's 100 ways, but I just picked 3. 3 ways that we leaders can bring change. We leaders can bring change. Number 1, a leader can bring change through subtraction. Kind of already mentioned this about taking away the wrong things. Taking away things that don't even matter anymore. Taking away things that once were good, and now they're bad. They've expired, and it's time to throw them away. If you have your Bibles, turn to 2 Kings chapter 18. We're going to read a passage of scripture there real quick. 2 Kings chapter 18.
Like it.
2 Kings chapter 18. I'm going to butcher some names in here, but just go with it, okay? In the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. Stop right there. He was 25. He already had one mark against him. He was young. Okay? Pick it up. His mother's name was mom, okay? Daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. I love what verse 4 says. He removed the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah pole. He broke into pieces the bronze snake Moses had made. For up until that time, the Israelites had been burning incense to it. It was called Neshtuhan. Hezekiah trusted the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. He held fast to the Lord and did not stop following. He kept all the commands that the Lord had given Moses. And the Lord was with him, and he was successful in whatever he undertook. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. I love that. King Hezekiah, at 25 years old, led like David did. He broke down the bronze snake. Can you imagine the outcry that took place from him doing this? What are you doing, Hezekiah? Do you not know who set that up?
Right.
Do you not know that that bronze snake saved us and our ancestors 50, 60, 70 years ago? What are you doing breaking that?
Well, now they're not worshiping it.
Exactly. They worship that bronze snake that once saved them. Can you, why are you changing things? It's always been done this way. We've always worshipped this bronze snake that Moses set up. No, you didn't. At first, it was there to deliver you. You got your focus off the deliverer and onto something else that brought you deliverance. People were healed from looking at the snake, and it was a big part of their history. What Hezekiah learned, though, was what was a cure in one season became a curse in another season.
Come on.
What became a cure in one season became a curse in another season. He upheld the law, but he destroyed the method. He upheld the laws of Moses. He upheld the relationship with God that David had. He followed God like his father David. He upheld the law, but he destroyed the method. We must learn that the greatest power of change in the church isn't addition of programs. Because remember, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I spoke that we can get so caught up in programs we just get burnt out.
Yeah.
Sometimes the greatest addition comes by subtraction. As leaders, we must never forget that God has called us to be monumental, not monuments. He has called the church to be monumental and not monuments. That is why we as leaders must lead change. I love what Bill Hybels says. Bill Hybels says, God didn't make you a leader to respond to stuff all day, but to move things forward. God did not make you a leader to respond to stuff all day long, but to move things forward. Remember in Acts, the church was exploding. Everything was great. They come to the leaders of the church and say, hey, who's going to feed the widows? What was their response? Find someone else to do it. It's the job of the leaders' church to pray, seek God, get a word, deliver the word. Why is it that anytime someone gets sick, they got to call the pastor of the church? They don't want a staff member. I've worked in those conditions. We're at the hospital, Pastor Chris. Can you tell Pastor Clyde to come pray for us? Well, he's in a meeting. I can come pray. No, we want the senior pastor. Does he have some holy hands or what? What's up with this? It's not the job of the lead pastor to go and run and make every hospital call ever known to man.
That's right.
It's not his ministry. But yet, unfortunately, we have pastors that have stepped aside from the leadership that God has called them to do, to lead and seek his face, to serve people in communion and hospital visits. And there's nothing wrong with that, but when you switch the priorities, you're going to run into a train wreck.
Yeah.
God has not called you as a leader to respond to stuff all day long, but to move things forward. A leader must move things forward. There's a guy named Leonard Sweet. He's wrote a couple books. One of the books he's wrote was 11. It's 11 relationships you need to have in life. Phenomenal butt-kicking book. I recommend it. Leonard Sweet says, change or be changed. In the old ecology of nature, change was a season as something abnormal. In the new ecology of nature, change is life's natural, normative state. What works today will not work tomorrow. The wonder is that more churches are not in disarray. They are standing pat, opting to uphold the status quo, rather than to upgo an upheaval. The wonder is more churches are not in more disarray. They're standing pat, opting to uphold the status quo, rather than undergo the upheaval. As a leader, we must bring change. If that means you got to bring change through subtraction, then do it. Number 2, a leader must connect the dots. A leader must connect the dots. The 4 dots are mission, vision, model, and programming or product, whichever one. Mission, vision, model, programming, or product. The mistake we make most often as leaders is that we see what's wrong and we immediately want to change what's wrong. But we first have to go back to the mission, the vision, and the model, and then look at the programming. For example, what's the mission of the church?
To spread the gospel.
Sarah said, what?
Mhm.
To make disciples. That's the mission of the church, to make disciples. What's the vision of Passion Church?
To be a biblical community, authentic biblical community that shares or celebrates something. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so you're going to have the mission of the church, which is to make disciples, to have an authentic biblical community, which is the bigger picture of the mission. It's a specific expression of the mission. The model is how do we get there? And then there's the programming or product that allows the mission, vision, and model to come together. People are more often open to change to a specific program or product when they can fully see the picture of the mission and vision. People are more often to change when they see the specific vision and program there, and they can fully see the mission and the vision that is the foundation of the program. It's the job of the leader to lead the people to be in love with the mission and the vision of the organization, of the church, whatever it is, and not be attached to a programming idea. It's the job of the leader to lead people to be in love with the mission and vision of the church or the organization, and not be attached to a programming idea. I was listening to a thing from Perry Noble, and he said it's so good. I love Perry Noble. If you haven't heard of him, check him out. Perry Noble says, we often confuse theology and methodology. We often confuse theology and methodology. So, as a leader, you've got to connect the dots.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to say, this is the program, yes. How is it affecting the mission? How is it affecting the vision? How are we modeling it? Is the mission of the church being accomplished through the program? You've got to connect the dots before you even bring change to any program or product. Number 3, leaders must always ask the question, what's the best way to ... What's the best way to? This question bridges the gap between the mission and vision, the mission and the program, the model in the program, the vision in the program, and everything else. It bridges the gap. What's the best way to? This question will always draw every leader back to the very foundation of the mission. It's not about having the answer, it's not about having an answer. It's about having the best answer when it comes to change. This question forces alignment with the mission, vision, and model. What's the best way to? What's the best way to? Richard Harrington says, the assumptions a team had held for the longest or most deeply are most likely to be its undoing. Some beliefs have become so obvious that they seem to set limits for debate. The assumptions a team had, an assumption the team has held the longest and most deeply is most likely to be its undoing. Some beliefs have become so obvious that they seem off limits for debate. What's the best way to? What's the best way to get people plugged into Passion Church? What's the best way to get people plugged in to PLC? What's the best way to get people plugged into small groups? What's the best way for people to get plugged in to the worship department? What's the best way for people to get plugged into the youth department? What is the best way for ministry to be done? People must buy into the vision. People won't buy into a person, a program, or ministry unless they see its effectiveness. In order for change to be had, you must create buy-in with the change even before they see it in action. In order to lead change, you must create buy-in with the change even before they see it in action. And the only way I can explain this, and Marshall will understand because it's an AT&T thing, but feature, bridge, benefit. When I'm on a call, I have a product. It is my job to sell the product to the customer by making them understand the benefit of having the said product. It's no different in the church. We have a product called Jesus. We have to do our very best to sell the product by showing the people how Jesus benefits them.
Yeah.
You have to build the connection, the feature, bridge, benefit. Jesus is the feature. How are you going to combine the bridge to make it cross over? And how are the benefits going to affect the person? Thank you for an AT&T job. Really didn't think I was going to like it, but that worked out great. People have got to buy into the vision. They have got to see the benefit of it. People have got to see the benefit of a ministry. If anybody goes to Pastor Brian and says, "Hey, I want to start a new ministry," he's going to sit down and listen to you. I know he will. But how is that going to benefit the vision, mission, and purpose of Passion Church? How is it going to do that? I know the man very well. If it does not affect the vision, if it does not support the vision, the mission, and purpose of the church, he's not going to let it happen. What's the point?
Right.
What's the point? It's going to be absolutely useless if it does not accomplish the vision, mission, and purpose of this church. We have to be able to cast vision in such a way that people buy into it before they even own it. That's one of the most difficult things a leader can do and has to do. Because you can stand up and cast vision all day long. But vision is taught before it's caught. Vision is taught before it's caught. So, we talked about how leaders lead change. And the second main point tonight is leaders execute change. Leaders execute change. It's one thing to have great vision, mission, purpose, model, programming, organization, whatever you want to call it. But if you cannot execute the vision and mission, you will never be able to change and tweak the programs of the vision effectively to reach people. You can have all the great vision in the world, but if you cannot effectively change and tweak the programs of the vision, you will never affect people. It's easy to drift or lose sight of the big picture, especially when problems arise and new opportunities emerge. Execution of change isn't about just communicating and casting vision. It's about seeing that vision come to pass. Brian has said it a million times, you get what you inspect, not what you expect. You get what you inspect, not what you expect. When I was preparing this, I thought of something I did when I was in youth ministry. I launched a program called E26. Our youth ministry had reached a plateau. It did not go anywhere for about 6 months. And I'm sitting there like, what do I do, Lord? What do I do? No new people were coming in. No life change was happening at the altars. It was just a complete plateau. At that time, it was just me and like maybe 2 other people to actually lead anything within our youth ministry. And I remember an old program. Not really old. I mean, it was a packet I probably got. I meant to bring some tonight just to give it to y'all, but I'll have to do it later. But it was probably a packet probably about 20, 25 pages long called E26. And it was something that my mentor came up with when he was in the same predicament with his youth ministry in San Antonio. E26 stood for element 26, and element 26 on the periodic table is iron. Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And he created this model, this method of getting more volunteers, getting more student leaders, and growing a youth ministry. He implemented it. The student ministries in San Antonio went from 75 to 250 in 6 months. I stood back and I watched. I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. So I remember I had the packet and I looked at it and I'm like, I don't even know what I can use here because half the stuff we didn't even have at the time. But I looked at it and I was like, well, follow-up, we can do that better. And cafe, I've always wanted to build one, so let's put this in the maybe section. And ushers, we don't really have a lot of kids, but we'll put the ushers here in the middle. Maybe we can implement ushers. And when I told people I wanted to have ushers in youth ministry, they're like, that's retarded, stupid. They saw the function of it, they're like, that's genius. So I went through this whole packet and I picked it apart and said, what can we do, what can't we do? And I revamped the whole thing, presented it to the 2 people I had. They're like, what do you think? They're like, I think this is actually going to help. So I walked around church one Sunday, said, hey, I went to everybody I could. Old people, young people, middle-aged people. I said, I need your help in youth ministry. And they're like, but I don't hang out with youth. I said, I don't care. I went to an 89-year-old grandma. She was incredible. She's still alive today. She's still kicking. She's great. Woman made some of the best cookies ever. So I went to her and I said, what was her name? Mary. I said, Mary, you make incredible cookies. She goes, thanks. That's what I hear. I said, well, it's the truth. Every time you come and we have some type of fellowship, your cookies are the first things to go. I said, what would you do if I asked you to be a part of my youth ministry team and make cookies every week so we can hand that to our first-time visitors? She goes, well, I'm at home. I have nothing else to do. I can do that. I said, seriously? You're 89 years old. You want to do this for me? She goes, yeah. Okay. So the first week, she brought 5 dozen cookies.
Wow.
5 dozen. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, we don't even have 25 kids. What do we do with 5 dozen cookies? We ate and ate and ate, and it was awesome.
That sounded amazing.
Great. The word got out that, hey, they're giving away free cookies, and they're super good. So we had visitors come. They get plugged in because of the free cookies, and it was great. I took this E26 packet, and once I got a whole team of people, I said, hey, you've been doing this ministry. You've been doing follow-up for me. You've been doing cookies. You've been running the cafe. You've been running sound and lights. You've been doing this. You've been doing that. Now, this is what you've been doing. Now, let me show you how it all comes together. And I gave him E26. And I was able to cast the vision. I was able to take the vision of the ministry, put it on paper, cast it to them, and they saw the overall picture of how it benefited them to be a part of the ministry and how it benefited the student because they were able to encounter God. It was like a whole new revelation hit them, and I'm like, this is awesome. What's going to happen here? Sure enough, man, visitor retention rate went up because I had someone in charge of follow-up. I had student leaders that were in charge of follow-up under the department head. I had 10 department heads, and under the department heads were student leaders who had student leaders under them to run the ministry of our youth ministry. It literally got to the point where all I did on a Wednesday night was get up and preach. I had my hands into so many other things before, and I was so stressed out. But when E26 developed and when it came together, I said, you guys are the ministers. I'm not looking about having students in ministry. I'm having students do ministry. And when my student leaders got a hold of it, they're like, this is, you don't want to do everything. You don't want to lead worship. You don't want to take up offering. You don't want to, I said, I don't want to do it. I just want to get them to preach. That's what I'm called to do. I just want to preach. And they're like, well, okay. So I had students start making videos. I had for video announcements. I had students start, I had this crazy idea for groups. And I didn't know I was going to go out because I stole the idea from Dustin over at Copper Point. It was working great. I said, well, let's try it here, see what happens. And so I got this idea of doing teams and groups. And so I broke everybody up. I got our entire roster. And I broke everybody up into groups of 3 because that's all we had enough room for. We didn't have 3. So I broke every student up I set aside my student leaders, and I said, student leaders, you guys are going to be the ones that are going to be in charge of the groups. I don't want to touch them. I will oversee them, and I'll have an adult leader be the department head of the groups. But I'm not going to really touch them. I'll walk around and I'll see how the groups are doing. If you need anything, let your department head know, and then I'll find out what you really need, and we'll run through there. So I remember the first week, we broke everybody off into teams, and they had team competitions and stuff, and they're there, and it seemed like it flopped. Because I was like, this isn't working the way I planned. But we tried it for 2 weeks, and the whole point of those teams was not to create, and I had a parent come up to me, you're just creating division in the church. Because I'm creating a team of competition in our youth ministry to help build relationships, okay, you can say what you want. And so, as the teams began to develop, and they got points and everything, and as they got that, it was cool to see students bring visitors in to be a part of their tribe or their team. Because it was their team. They made up their own team, they had their own color, they did whatever they wanted. I gave them poster board, I gave them streamers, they created their whole banner, flag thing, whatever they did. And literally, it was like massive team competitions every time we did a game. It was crazy. And I'm standing back one day and I'm like, how did we get to this? Because within 2 months, I had to multiply 4 groups, and we started with 3. So at the time, I was running almost 8, 9 groups in just 2 months. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, how is this working? I don't get this. But students bought into the vision. Leaders bought into the vision. I cast the vision. I executed it. And I said, hey, if this doesn't work, we'll come back and try something else that didn't work before. But as the teams launched, the ministry began to grow. Leaders began to come up from students. I would pull students in for my cadre team. I would pull them in for my alliance team. And I would sit and pour into their lives. I would sit and pour into the visions that God had given them and say, hey, you're not going to be what your parents are telling you, that you're a loser and that all this other stuff. But God has created you to be this person. And you're going to change the world. And seeing students not only grab a hold of the vision of the youth ministry, but see them get the big picture of my heart for ministry was huge. After a year of being gone, I can guarantee you can still go to my core leaders that I had. They're all at the switch now. They're all at the switch. But I can guarantee you can go to them and you ask them, what's the heart of Chris's ministry? And they'll be able to tell you because I sat down and poured it into them. I was able to execute the vision. I was able to give them something tangible and they were able to catch it. If I never evaluated our ministry, if I never sat down and said, what is not working, what is working, we would have never got to where we were. Leaders must constantly inspect themselves, their staff, their volunteers, the programs, and the products that they are presenting. If pastors never inspected their churches and where the church was at the current time, they would never see the need to change because everything they looked at was good. You can look good on the outside, yet be dying on the inside. If you guys give me 5 more minutes, I'm almost done. I think one of the greatest reasons churches and companies are in decline today and they're losing product and revenue is because due to the fact that no one in leadership is inspecting anything. They're assuming that everything is good and that life is fine. Remember Jesus? He said to the religious leaders of the day that you look like whitewashed tombs. Mm-hmm. You look good on the outside, but inside you're dying. And what's sad is across America today, every Sunday there's churches who look beautiful on the outside, yet they're dead inside because they've never took the time to initiate change, to evaluate the ministries and the product that they're presenting. And they've just let themselves die because they don't take time to evaluate and initiate change. Remember a couple weeks ago, Pastor Brian told the story of that cathedral in Europe or Germany, where it was it? That huge cathedral?
Yeah.
Set, 10,000 people? And the church was, 120? 100. And a 10,000 seat auditorium. It got to that place at one time of having 10,000 people because they constantly evaluated themselves. They constantly produced change. But somewhere along the road, they got to the point and said, oh, we're good, we're okay. And now instead of 10,000 people, there's 100 people sitting in a beautiful cathedral because they never took time to evaluate where they were at and see what needed to be changed in their church. Ministries and churches begin to die when they no longer inspect who they are and they settle for what they've become. Ministries and churches begin to die. Organizations begin to die when they no longer inspect who they are and they settle for what they've become. When you settle in the church and you don't evaluate anything, you begin to kill the bride. You begin to kill the bride. It's essential that as leaders we must lead change. Don't lead change for the sake of change, but lead change because you see a need of something that needs to be changed. Lead change because you see the mission, the vision, and the purpose of your life, your ministry, your organization, and you see something is not being accomplished, and you want to be able to see it be effective again. Don't be afraid as a leader to pull the trigger of change. Don't be afraid to pull the trigger of change. Because if you don't pull the trigger of change, you're not leading anymore as a leader. You're not leading if you're afraid to bring change. Too many people are dying today because they do not want to bring change. In a closing thought, I looked at the story of David. We all know the story of David. He was anointed king. It took him, 17, 18 years to get to the throne. Can you imagine what would have happened to David if he decided one day, I'm not going to wait. I want to bring about the change that was promised. And so he goes and he kills Saul. He takes the throne. He rushed it. Imagine what